Hello there. In this video, I'm going to be discussing how to apply baseline grids to your layout. As you can see here in this layout, there is a baseline grid. And what a baseline grid is, it is the line where the baseline of the text sits. Baseline grids can help text-heavy layouts appear more neater, organized, and easier to read for your viewer. So if you're doing any layouts with a lot of text, you must use baseline grids. This is in addition to your columns and grids that you have in your layout. Here's an example of a layout where a baseline grid is not used. If you take your eye and guide it along from left to right across the columns, you can see that the lines of text do not line up. This may seem like a minor issue, but it does affect the overall legibility and professional look of the layout. So let's go through the steps of how to apply a baseline grid. I have here the beginning steps of the layout where the text is just in a single text box, single column text box, and there's no columns or grids established. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our margins and columns. I'll do that in my master pages. I'll go into my menu, layout, margins and columns, and for this layout, I'll give it 6 columns. When I return to the page, you can see that the column structure is now set up. Columns are important for aligning your elements on the page and for kind of knowing where to start and stop with your elements. For example, here in the title and deck are aligned within 3 columns. In the photo, the subject is contained within these 2 columns. So having columns within your layout helps the page enhance its overall composition value. Let's take a look at the baseline grid settings in our preferences. I'm going to press Command-K on the Mac or Control-K on Windows. And here in the grids section, here are the settings for the baseline grid. The increment value is connected to your font size. The rule of thumb is if you deduct 2 from the increment value, that's what your font size should be. So for example, if this is 12 points, deduct 2, and you have 10 points for your font size. Your view threshold set at 75% means that you will only see these baseline grids if you are at 75% magnification or higher. You can lower that to 50 if you'd like. Go ahead and press OK. And if you do not see your baseline grid, you can go to View, Grids, and choose Show Baseline Grid. You'll also want to make sure that your margins and columns are showing. You can do that by pressing W. Now that we have our baseline grid, you can see that the text is not aligned to it at all. So let's begin our formatting. I'm going to click on this box one time and change my column structure to 2 columns. While you can have 2 columns across the page with a 1/2 inch margin, I prefer to have a little bit of more white space on the left side. You can see how the page columns help me know where to align the text box. Now let's begin to format the text. I'm going to click 5 times inside this text box to select all of the text. I'm going to open up my paragraph styles. You can find this under Window, Styles, Paragraph Styles. I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and click this button here to create a new style. I'm going to name this new style Body Text and make sure that Apply to Selection is checked and Preview is checked. Now I don't want to make changes while the text is highlighted, so I'm going to press OK, click my selection tool, make sure the box is still selected, and then go back into my body text paragraph style. In the basic character format, I'm going to change my font size. Remember that our baseline is set to increments of 12. So my font size should be 12 minus 2. So I'll change my font size here to 10. Next, I'll come down to indents and spacing and work on my alignment. I want my alignment for this particular article to be justify left. That way I have even columns on both sides. This option is up to you. Here is where we make our baseline grid settings. Where it says align to grid, choose all. And you can see now that the text sits nicely on the baseline grid. Notice that our paragraphs are very close together. So we can come here to our space after settings and click one time just to separate the paragraphs based on the baseline grid. Because I have my text justified, I'll have to come here to my justification settings and change these values to avoid unsightly rivers and awkward gaps in between the words. You can find justification settings in the weekly folder. Once I'm satisfied with the look of the body text, I can press OK. By pressing W on my keyboard, I can hide the guides and take a look at the page layout. Overall, you can see that by using columns and baseline grids, it helps to create a clean, polished look for your layout that's easy to read and pleasing to look at. You can find additional articles and resources and videos on baseline grids and designing on a grid in this week's weekly folder.